for coming out today. This is fantastic. Here, I'm going to scoot back in my throne so that I can see appropriately, because I'm not the focus. So I'm Elizabeth Schlater. I'm Deputy Director and I'm Curator of Exhibitions here at the University of Richmond Museums. This is the penultimate event. I like to throw that word out whenever I can because it sounds so smart. It's the second to last event that we're doing in conjunction with this exhibition, Growing Up in Civil Rights, Richmond, A Community Remembers. The last event to put on your calendar is on Tuesday, April 9th at 6 p.m. and this is in our calendar up front. We're hosting Civil Rights Richmond Then and Now. It's a theatrical and dance intervention performed by University of Richmond and Armstrong Leadership Program students in dialogue with the exhibition, in hopes of sparking conversation about Richmond's youth activists yesterday and today. And that event is free. It's going to be in the gallery. There'll be spoken word, there'll be music. Patricia is the director, the professor?
I'm one of the professors.
One of the professors, yeah, got it. Yeah. So it'll be in this space, and I hope some of you guys will return. So it should be really great, because I know the students have been working hard and been really inspired and engaged with the stories that are here. We've also had, we had an amazing run of events. We had a panel discussion during the opening. We were able to be included in the commemoration of MLK Day. The last gallery discussion we had featured Reverend Lyons and Royal Robinson, who are with us today too, which is awesome. We had that in the George Wythe Memorial Room, which is the room to the right where everyone had a connection to the high school, which was wonderful. Today we have Renee Fleming Mills and Reggie Gordon with us. So I'm going to kick off the conversation, but I'm basically just here to moderate and I'm the timekeeper, so we can end close to around 3 o'clock. I'm hoping that many of you will ask questions or share stories or reflections as well, and I think our two panelists are game for that too. So please don't be shy to speak up. So instead of me introducing you formally, I'm going to ask you guys to share a little bit about the roles that you play in your life now. And I'll start so you can see what I'm thinking of, but you can say whatever you want in terms of the roles in your life now. And then after that, we'll go back and talk a little bit about your stories. So for myself, and I repeat, because many of these roles are the same that I mentioned last time when we had the event. So I am the Deputy Director and Curator of Exhibitions here at the University of Richmond Museums. So I was Project Director for this exhibition, and then I curate some shows by myself. In the lobby by the bathrooms in the Baldwin Center is an exhibition called Man Up, Man Down, Images of Masculinity from works in the collection. So I curated that. And I also help with forming the museum's collection. Right now, I'm also teaching a freshman seminar in engaging contemporary art, and I know some of my students are here, which is awesome. See you. And I really enjoy teaching it because I love interacting with students and hearing their thoughts about contemporary art. So that's a lot of fun. So that's my professional role. My personal role, pretty much I'm all about work and family right now. I have a husband and a daughter who's 16, and they are both on a road trip, Northeast Corridor, looking at colleges. So I kind of wish I was with them, but I'm kind of happy that I'm here. My 80-year-old father was moved here from Texas in January, and I'm thrilled to have him here. That keeps me pretty busy, but he's a lot of fun and pretty smart, so that's great. I'm a cat and a dog owner. That keeps me busy too, but then I realized with the dog, I walk him every night with my husband. That kind of gives my husband and me some time every evening to talk, which is wonderful. I hadn't quite clued into that until just recently, so that's nice. Yeah, so I'm all about my family right now and my job. I meditate a little bit, I'm trying, I'm reading, I go to museums in my free time, which is probably obvious, because I work in one. So those are kind of my roles with my life right now. If you guys wouldn't mind sharing some of yours.
Great. Cool. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Thank you all for being here, and I'm glad to be in the presence of the fellow folks who are featured in this exhibit. It's an honor. So my personal role, my wife is here, I'm a husband, so my wife is right there, Rashida Gray, and sitting next to my daughter, Kai Fox, and I have a son. Kai is 15 at J.R. Tucker. My son's 18, about to go off to Howard Howard and Paul, and my wife is a physician. Some of you probably know my parents. My dad is Reverend George West. He grew up in Churchill. My mom is Mary Gordon West. So I'm a preacher's kid. And you know, life is good. So professionally, I work for the city of Richmond, and I've been in this role as the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Human Services for about 3 months. Prior to that, I was the Director of Community Wealth Building. So this is my hometown. I moved away for a while, but came back. And so I think I've always been invested in how do we create pathways for people to have stability and financial well-being. So that's what I actually do day in, day out with the whole portfolio, from building wealth, social services, justice services, parks and rec. All that is part of my daily work. So I'm part of the mayor's team.
Good afternoon. My name is Renee Fleming Mills, and personally, I married my husband is sick today, so I left him at home when he running in and out. This is my sister, who's also in the exhibit with me, Glennis Fleming. And I have 3 children and 5 grandchildren. Unfortunately, the grandchildren live away, so we don't see them very often. And professionally, I'm an HR director with the state of Virginia. I've been with the state for on and off for, I don't want to say how many years, many years. I've been an HR director in the private sector, and I actually started out thinking I wanted to work with mentally ill people, so my first job was a rehab counselor at Eastern State Hospital. That lasted 15 months, and I decided it wasn't quite for me. But I've been in human resources for a long time now, and I'm very involved in my community. I'm a deacon at my church, Ebenezer Baptist Church, and I'm involved with quite a few community service organizations because my father was president of Consolidated Bank and Trust Company, which is now Premier Bank, but historically it was a black bank. And my mother was retired as the chairman of the business department at Thomas Jefferson High School. And both of them gave back to the community all the time. So that's how we grew up, giving back to the community. So no matter where I have lived, like Reggie, I moved around the country back here, but wherever I lived, I always gave back to the community.
Great, thank you. So like I said, going back in time, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about your past and how they formed who you are now. I think both of you had some movement with your families during your elementary, middle school years that kind of parlay into your history. Reggie, I know I just reviewed the catalog entry that you had moved from to Battery Park from out of town, and then Renee, you moved from a relatively segregated black community on the north side and into an area that was white and then changed. So I wonder if you two wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about that.
Okay, sure. So I was born in Farmville, Virginia, and because my parents lived in Blackstone. So actually, I just remembered part of the story as I was reflecting on the day. So in Blackstone, I was one of the first 2 or 3 black kids to go to the primary school in Blackstone. And so that was my first exposure to integration, quite honestly. And the big joke in my household is that when I came home after a few days, I said to my parents, you know, the kids are colored white. I just had no concept of why they said their hair is blonde and their skin is different. So then they said, well, what are you? And I hadn't really thought about it, quite honestly, you know. And so after that experience, my father decided, I think there were policemen outside of our house in Blackstone, and it was sort of controversial to integrate the schools there. So he decided to move to Richmond. And he came and looked for homes in Richmond and found one in Battery Park, Overbrook Road. And so that's why we came to Richmond. We came to Richmond for the public schools because he wanted us to have better opportunity. So I started off at Norwell Elementary, which is in walking distance of my house on Overbrook Road, and then went to Benford and Albert Hill and TJ. And I think I knew your mother, teacher. And so it was, the reason we moved around was to find better educational opportunities, and I feel that it was a really good move for my family. My brother and I, we had great experiences, which I'll talk about later, in Richmond Public Schools.
Like Reggie, I started out at A.B. Norwell Elementary School, which was totally segregated. And then they only went to the 5th grade, so 6th grade, everybody had been going to Baker Elementary School, so that's where I went. However, that was the year they integrated Stewart Elementary School. So it was a group of friends who were still friends who went to Stewart, and then the other half of us went to Baker. So they had a totally different experience than we had. The experience I had at Baker was the first time I remembered having an experience with color. And when I say color, I mean the light-skinned blacks versus the dark-skinned blacks. And our teacher was a black male, first black male I'd ever had as a teacher, but he actually made comments, and you could see he favored the light-skinned blacks. And my best friend, who remained my best friend until her death in 2017, she was very outspoken, so I was falling behind her. And so she came back the next day and said something about, she was quoting some Bible verse, and she was saying, but it was dark in here yesterday, so we ended up in the principal's office. But after the 6th grade, we went to Chandler Junior High School, and this was during the time of freedom of choice. And my father actually built a house on Woodrow Avenue, which was right down the street from Chandler. So it really made sense for me to go to Chandler. And then my friends from Stewart came to Chandler. And then from there, I went to John Marshall. And one of the reasons I went to John Marshall is because my mother taught at Maggie Walker. And I knew I was not going to go to Maggie Walker for 40 years when my mother was teaching. So I was like, I didn't have a whole lot of choices. But some interesting experiences at Chandler and John Marshall. Do you want me to go into the experiences now?
Yeah, that'd be great, yeah.
A couple of the experiences at Chandler, when we were, like I said, there's a group of us, there's 8 of us who sort of have remained friends from elementary school all the way up until now. So we've been friends over 60 years. But back then it was about 12 of us, and they had a talent show at Chandler. And we were in the talent show, and we were sort of, West Side Story was out then, and so we did our group was called, our act was called Dance at the Gym. And our gym teacher worked with us, and she said, well, you have to have something dramatic at the end. So we had on t-shirts, we had on jeans, and just a side story on that, we went to Woolco. I don't know how many of you all remember Woolco. We went to Woolco to buy the t-shirts and jeans, and we were followed around the store like we were going to steal something. And none of us had even had that thought in our mind. But anyway, getting back to the talent show, so at the end, however we ended it up, our legs were up in the air, and I guess our butts were to the audience. And so in the practice, the principal called us and said, you're not going to end your act like that, because he didn't think it was right. And then we were at the beginning of the talent show, and he moved us to the end of the talent show. And so my friend, the one who got me in trouble in 6th grade, said, oh, so now we have to go to the back of the bus again? And so we were towards the end of the talent show, but what we didn't, as we've talked about over the years, what we didn't realize is that usually they say one of the best acts for last, but you know, in our 7th grade, 8th grade minds, we weren't thinking like that. There were times, again, because there were so few of us at Chandler, we sort of banded together. There were a lot of fights in the cafeteria, but we only ate with blacks and the whites ate with whites. But my friend, following her again, she wanted to learn how to ice skate. And so I said, okay, I didn't really have any intention of learning how to ice skate, but I didn't want her to go by herself because we had to ride a bus after school to this ice skating rink. And so we would go to this ice skating rink once a week, and then she broke her ankle. And so right after she broke her ankle, I rode the bus by myself. And the people called me names, they threw spitballs at me, all kinds of things happened, so I never went back after that. So those are the types of experiences we had. One of my friends said that she tripped on the steps, but she's really not sure if somebody pushed her or if she really tripped, because she was scared to death when it happened. So there's a lot of things that when you look back, you're not really sure, but you remember certain incidents that happened. When we were at John Marshall, Dixie was our school song. And we asked, just as an aside, our principal from junior high also was our principal in high school. And so we didn't like him in junior high, and now he's there in high school with us. But we went to him and we asked if they could stop playing Dixie, and they would not stop playing Dixie. And then at one game, the band, some of the band members, when they were supposed to play Dixie, started playing all different kinds of songs. It was just a bunch of sounds coming out. And after that, they stopped playing Dixie as a school song. But to have us go and ask them to stop, and they would not stop. So that was just one of the things. I have many stories, but that's just one of them.
When I was thinking about today, I went and found my freshman yearbook, 1975, Thomas Jefferson High School, because I was trying to pull up the memories, and we talked about this a little bit earlier. So I graduated from TJ in 1978. I think those of you who are older were the true trailblazers, because I have mostly positive memories of what happened when I was in high school. So now, what probably flipped was the demographic of the student body. When I started freshman year, looking at the yearbook, it was about 50-50. And even when I look at the comments from some of my best friends, a lot of them were white kids. By the time I graduated, the demographic was quite different. So one thing I've always has challenged me is what happened to my friends. And in fact, I just looked this morning and one of my buddies said something like, I think, Reggie, my family is going to put me in Freeman, or moving to going to Freeman. So even the way I read this, this was fun, I'm having a good time, but for some reason my family's moving. So that's been one, I wish I could go back in time and just almost, what was going on in those households of my friends? Because a lot of them weren't coming home, I don't imagine, and saying we were scared or terrified or anything was different, but it was the parents that were making the assumption that something was going to be detrimental to the educational outcomes for their kids. And I recall that TJ was always one of those schools that was known for excellence. And some of the same teachers were there that had been at TJ in earlier years. The student body was different, but the teachers were the same. Just to brag on those years, we took French from second grade all the way to senior year back in that era in Richmond. And so by the time we got to senior year, I think the kids from TJ, mostly African American, placed 1 through 10 in the state, beating out the private schools. So it was, but the teacher was the one that was like drilling us on making sure we were doing poetry in French by the time I graduated from high school. So it's interesting to reflect on just 4 or 5 years earlier, just the name calling and the tension and the lack of people that maybe calmed down somewhat, in my experience, by the time I got there. And busing was, it was sort of odd to get on the bus in the morning and come to the west end of Richmond, which I didn't know much about the west end, but the neighborhoods looked similar. In fact, I had a really good mentor during those days, and it was Les Hill, a white man who lived in Bellevue. He was the CEO of the Red Cross, and I was a Red Cross volunteer. And he once said to me, Reggie, Richmond is really odd, because unless people open their doors, there are certain neighborhoods, the houses look similar, but when you open the doors and people walk out, you see that they're segregated. But when you just drive through town, you wouldn't be able to know. You had Arden Hill, you had Bellevue, West End. So there was a lot of diversity in the types of buildings and architecture, but for some reason we had these mental barriers with regard to here's where white people live and here's where black people live. So I really feel that my experience was a time of transition of the people who wanted to be together and the parents who were willing to have their children both ways, white and black, be together. That was working pretty well. So I think I had a good education.
So speaking of education, you guys both shared in your interviews, and I think we have, I can't remember if they're in the panels, but I know they're in the catalog, about your college experiences. And would you mind sharing a little bit about that as well?
Because things went well in high school, we had AP classes, I wanted to go to Duke. And I was accepted at Duke and William & Mary. And I remember, and there's a story that's on the panel there, is we needed to get financial aid for me to go to Duke. And my father was blind, he was a veteran, so we went to the VA office to get the veterans benefits for education. And that's when I remember the scene with a white man who was in charge of discerning who was able to get the veterans benefits, said to me something like, well, that's too high of a bar for you. You don't want to go there. You want to go to a black school. And my father, who was blind, had a cane. He stood up and literally swung the cane. He went, my son is going to Duke. We don't want your money if we have to pay for it ourselves. So as a kid, I'm like, wow, the drama of that experience, but it made it clear to me, I'm going to Duke, and my family's going to pay for it, and I'm going to find money somehow. So I walked into Duke feeling like I had the education and the family support to do well there. That's when I had the culture shock. Because Duke, back in those days, maybe I think it's changed now, but comprised of mostly high-income white kids. And we were, the black kids were in a minority. The 5,000 in the student body, 300 blacks. And so, of course, the black kids hung together at Duke. And I remember sitting in classes, and this was during the affirmative action era. So, kids saying to me, strangers, you took a spot that was for one of my friends. And then just distancing themselves from us as if, like, this was the worst thing that was happening. These black kids at our school. I remember Jesse Helms coming through campus. I know. He came through campus and he left the president's office, and one of the more radical friends, like your friend perhaps, was standing there, and they could tell he got his limousine and he looked at a bunch of black kids on Duke's campus, and the guy said, "Why are you looking at us like that? You'd rather us be out there picking cotton?" And he did one of these thumbs up signs. And so it was year after year of not only the student body, but maybe the environment that was, you don't belong here. And that is why, when I did fine, in spite of that, that's why I went to Howard for law school. Because, having the strong, nurturing support in public schools in Richmond, then being thrust into an environment where everybody thought you're stupid, you don't belong, I was like, nope, I need to go back to an environment where I can get my sense of self and not feel like every day I'm being judged for my race as opposed to for my academic capacity and ability. So.
Well, when I was in high school, our counselor was also the football coach. And he pretty much told me I would never get into William & Mary, so I applied early decision and got in, and never applied anywhere else, whereas some of my white friends applied regular decision and did not get in. I was in the top 15 out of over 300 students, so there really was no reason that I should not have gotten in just based on my merit and my activities, etc. But he was determined that, I would not make it. And I've had friends tell me that some of the teachers there told them they would only be secretaries. There was no way they could be anything better than that. They were also told certain schools they couldn't go to. And so out of the 8 of us who have remained friends, only 2 of us went to white schools. The others all went to black schools. And the reason they said they went is because they were tired of the 6 years we had, and some of them had 7, because it was constantly trying to prove that you were just as good as. Starting at Chandler, I was in all advanced and honors courses, but my best friend, her mother had to, which we didn't even know until later, but her mother actually had to go and make sure we were in those classes because they felt that one, you know, if you're in one advanced class, that's enough. But she's like, but no, they were recommended to be in all advanced classes and all honors classes, so why are they being denied? And so because of her going behind the scenes. And so then, when I was at John Marshall, I was still in all advanced classes and all honors classes, which meant the group of white students that I was with were the same white students from class to class to class. So that's how I can remember all of them very well. And I know the ones who were nice and I know the ones who were not so nice. What I found out later is that being on the student newspaper and the yearbook, we didn't know that there were parties being held for the students. So the woman who was the teacher, I guess, sponsor for the newspaper, she would have parties at her house for the other students who worked in the newspaper, but we were never invited. We never even knew about these. So we don't even know how many things like that were going on that we didn't know. And I have a friend now who is more like a work colleague, but every now and then he and I'll sit down and talk because he's white. He went to Ginter Park, Chandler, and John Marshall. So we went 6 years together. And he was one of those smart, nerdy students, so he was in all my classes. So we've had a bond ever since. And he has said some things to me within the past few years that I didn't know. There's no way I would know. For example, when the first African American wanted to get into the Key Club, and he said the comments that were made from the teachers, from the students, and he was sort of apologizing to me because he felt that he knew it was wrong, but he didn't say anything. And I said, well, you were 15 years old, or whatever you were, you know. And then another thing he said is he went to our principal and said, why don't we study African American history? And the principal said, well, after one day, what would you study? So this is the type of thinking that was behind the people who were over our school. And again, those were not things I would ever have known if he had not shared those things with me. What's interesting is our 50th reunion is coming up this year, and I put myself on the committee to make sure. The reason I did that is because I'm still in touch with quite a few black kids and the black people from the school, and I want to make sure that our ideas and thoughts were represented, because in some of the other reunions we've had, obviously they were not. And what is very interesting is last week we had a meeting, and it's 3 or 4 black people on the committee, but only 2 of us were at the meeting last week. And all of the white people who were on the committee were talking about what wonderful memories they had of John Marshall, even though they knew it was hard because, you know, of integration, but overall it went very well, and what a great principal we had. I mean, it went on and on and on. I thought, and I finally said, we must have gone to 2 different schools because I couldn't take it anymore, you know. One thing I did want to mention is that while we were there, one of my 8 friends ended up being the first black homecoming queen. And we had tried to get one the year before, but we thought if we all the blacks voted in a block that we would do it, but all the whites then voted in a block, so we didn't get it. But the next year when she got it, she obviously had to get white and black votes. But again, during that time, only light-skinned blacks with long, pretty hair were even considered for those things. But recently, she saw 2 people who are on the committee, the reunion committee. She saw them. She was home and she saw them. And she said, oh, do you remember me? And they said, oh yeah, you were the first May Court queen. Oh. They didn't even remember that. They knew she was the first something. To us, it was really something that has stuck in our mind. But we saw just from that comment to others, it was, you know, it was no big deal to them. I mean, it probably was at the time, but we were just thinking, wow, you know, how could you even forget that? That's just something that's in our mind because she was the first black homecoming queen.
What did you study at Duke?
Public policy.
Public policy, okay. Oh, it worked out really well. Great, and then what did you study at William & Mary?
Long story.
Okay.
I started out in psychology, and then when I found out I had to do experimental psychology, I said, that's not for me. And that year, William and Mary actually came up with interdisciplinary studies. So I combined sociology, anthropology, and psychology, and studied mental illness in various cultures. So I was really interested in mental illness from an early age. So that's what I did. And then I finished William and Mary in 3.5 years because I was determined. Many of the blacks who were in my class, I was in the 3rd class of blacks at William and Mary, and it was maybe 20 to 30 blacks in my class, and the majority of them left because they had not been in integrated schools before, and they wanted to have fun in college, and believe me, we did not have a lot of fun, so they went to other schools. Where was I going with this? But I was determined, as much as I did not like the experiences, that it was not going to defeat me, that I was going to finish William and Mary no matter what. So I finished in 3.5 years, and then I went to graduate school that March. So I finished in January, and then I went straight to graduate school in March, because my father said he'd pay for it if I went straight to school, so that's why I went. And the reason I picked William and Mary is because my father said that we had to go to a state school. And at that time, William and Mary was one of the cheapest state schools. And I knew he was going to have to come out of his paycheck with the money, so I was really thinking more of him. And my parents both had graduated from Virginia State, and I didn't want to follow in their footsteps because I had followed in my mother's footsteps at Narl, and I was always known as Miss Fleming's daughter. So I felt like if I went to state, I'd be known as somebody's daughter, even though now that I look back, I probably wouldn't have been, but that was my thought at the time.
When you mentioned the principal of John Marshall, how things changed by the time I graduated. The principal at TJ was black. It was Morgan Edwards. And at that point, the mayor of Richmond was black. So it was the environment had shifted even in those few years.
So before I turn this over to everyone here, would you mind telling us a little bit about Arthur Ashe?
Okay, I know a little bit about
Yeah, just about your...
Oh, so I grew up on Overbrook Road, which, and it's for a silver house, Overbrook Road, in Battery Park. And so the tennis courts were 2 blocks from my house. So during the summer, it was not uncommon to hear a buzz around the neighborhood because people were saying, Arthur Ashe is down the street, so people would run out of the houses and go down to Battery Park and watch Arthur Ashe play tennis. And so many of my neighbors were excellent in tennis. In fact, Rodney Harmon, one of my neighbors, ended up playing in the US Open. So the environment in that pocket of Northside was tennis and Arthur Ashe, and those tennis courts are now called the Arthur Ashe Tennis Courts. So I didn't know him personally, but it was something that kids in the neighborhood did. You knew him?
When I taught at UVA for 3 years, and when I was there, he actually came as a spokesperson from his company at the time. He was on the board of directors of an insurance company. So for career day, we actually had him 2 out of the 3 years that I was at UVA. And I so regret now because I actually picked him up from the airport, took him, stayed with him, went to dinner with him, and I do not have not one autograph.
And how's your game? Did you pick me up?
I didn't pick it up.
All right, so I have many more questions, but I know you guys are here to share and interact as well, so yeah.
Hi, I'm Yolanda Burrell-Taylor. I'm also one of the participants in the exhibit. And it was interesting to hear your reflections on TJ. You came out of class of 78. I was there in 69, 70 for my sophomore year. I distinctly remember walking into homeroom one morning, white homeroom teacher. I was not paying any attention to what was going on, but when I walked in, I noticed that the teacher and several of the other white students were around a desk with a map of the city of Richmond. And I just went onto my desk and I got called up and she wanted me to point out where I lived. So I immediately just, and she said, but there's no street name there. And I said, I realize there's no street name there. It's only 3 blocks long. There's never been a street name there, but that's where I live. She asked me if I was sure. So which I thought was kind of bizarre, because here I was in high school. I think I know where I live. But, and I basically told her that. She invited me out into the hall and started reading me and telling me she should take me to the principal's office. And me, with my juvenile insanity, said, okay, let's go. Because I felt I may have been wrong in being disrespectful to her, but she was also wrong in asking me to verify where I lived in front of the other students and stuff. So she just looked at me and said, next time. But so I had definitely a different experience at TJ than you did that 1 year later.
My name is Ashley Taylor Barrow. I'm her daughter.
Pass the microphone to you.
Yeah, that works, yeah.
So my question was for both of y'all. I wanted to know, we've talked a little bit about your experience with integrated schools and then going on to primarily white institutions for your higher education. I'm currently studying education policy and looking kind of at the intersectionality between race and gender and education. And I wanted to know, what were y'all's thoughts on the sort of pattern of resegregation that we're experiencing right now, in especially Richmond public schools, but actually all across the nation?
Good question.
I have realized that children need a chance to understand who they are, their culture, and there is a benefit, this is going to sound odd, but there's a benefit to that segregated kind of environment. And I think, in retrospect, I wish I had gone to Howard undergrad, and then I would have been bolstered and finished baking and ready to go into an environment where I might have to fight, you know. And so I'm conflicted about, maybe that's just what many of us need, particularly our young kids, just to make sure that they have nurturing, positive experiences. So maybe this resegregation is not necessarily a negative, so that then they're able to face the world. And we have a global world. So unless and until you're very confident about your skills and your capacity and your ability to be successful, you know, I think you could sort of go backwards if you're thrust into any kind of toxic environment too soon. You know, I missed a lot of the whites only signs and sitting in the back of the bus, which I'm grateful for all of you were trailblazers there. But I've read and heard people say what went wrong in some of our communities after integration. You know, we had black businesses, black banks, black hotels. It was this stability that maybe began to unravel once we integrated. I know that it may be provocative, but I think there's something there that we need to really study.
One thing I forgot to say earlier was that in elementary school, we felt very nurtured because everybody from the janitor on up was pushing us to succeed. And I'm not sure, even though the schools may be more segregated now, I'm not sure if they're getting that nurturing that you're talking about, because the teachers, I don't know how the teachers are pushing the students, or if they're pushing the students. Okay. And also the buildings that they have to go to school in. We did not experience the types of schools, buildings that they're in. And being on a board of an organization that looks at the disparities, just for example, Henrico, the disparity between Eastern Henrico and Western Henrico, it's just really opened my eyes to what our students are going through versus what students in the West End experience. So even though I think maybe bonding together is good, I'm just not sure if the nurturing is really happening, which it definitely happened when we were growing up.
I think,
Thank you. I really appreciate both of your comments so far. As I was talking earlier, when I look at this whole project, I see segments of our community progressing. I'm in the middle. I was in the middle at the end, pretty much, of the march. But all my life, I've seen the water fountains. My whole thought is that we need to teach everybody how to be human. We had a beautiful community in spite of. We had savvy teachers, we had savvy preachers, we had people all on one accord. And as I learn about all the different white organizations that during the time they didn't show their faces, but the different churches were doing certain things together to foster that time. Now what I'm saying is, we live in a time, a transitional time now, a very pivotal time. We can't go back.
That's right.
All ships have to rise. Black women teachers, because when I taught, when I came back from government work in the, when did it? But anyway, when I came back and I remember your father. One of the persons that I came to was the bank. And I think you were your sisters were way in college then. And I had worked in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, in state government. And that shows you how the families and how the community was back in the day. They told me to go to the granddaughter, Desmond, Miss Desmond, right? Yes, right. And she told me to go and make sure that you touched Jesse Flint. And I came back home into a different Richmond that I had missed. And the connection was knowing who to go to and all. And the people, what I'm saying is the nurturing people that we had went into a different environment. I always call it the teachers that we had were like our anchor teachers, the teachers that were able to keep everybody else in line and teach you how to teach kids. Well, they went all to other schools. And then young teachers coming in, they didn't have that benefit. And I'm not so sure when I came back to Richmond, I substituted, long-term substitute. And when I went from time to time, I could see a whole lot of the things that we had. When I went through Armstrong and all like that, you could go out in the hall. Now when I go to Armstrong, or when I visited Armstrong, you had almost like to serve with love. You know, things had changed. And why? Because those things were not put in place. So we have to learn, the public schools have to come up with ways that we learn how to make all teachers lovers of wanting to educate all children. When you said that the demographics changed, but the teachers wanted to teach. And now in the schools, we don't have the arts in there. We don't have the, what's the other things? We don't have the arts and we don't have the languages in there. When we have that, then we cut down on the disciplinary problems. Then we also help kids wanting to know, wanting to go into the fields that you're talking about. And they want to dream and they want to learn. But I think that's the problem. Because if we go backwards at this time, with the climate in the White House, and all, it's going to be...
Whoa. I have a question. It's short.
Okay.
If you go back in time and how you were educated, and you look at the pipeline from school to prison, how would you make a difference? How would you change that? What happened? Am I making sense?
Okay. I think there are lots of factors that are external, like the introduction of drugs into our communities, so much so that, you know, obviously lots of books about that now. Intentionality about moving black boys, black people toward a life of being in an institution. You know, and so how do we, to your point, how do we have some kind of facts that now it's subjective. We talk about it, we say we can't, if children aren't reading at a certain grade level by 3rd or 4th grade, then that's the reason you're building certain prisons. I mean, that's an urban legend. It might be based in some sort of fact. But I think something needs to occur in our own communities to recognize that this prison pipeline is something that is of an urgent matter for our own communities. And what can we do to break it? How do we make sure that our families are aware that it's a systematic approach to push people out of the society? Then you can't vote once you get out of prison. I work in nonprofits with wealth building, right? Mm-hmm. Most of the men who are homeless in Richmond, just because I studied this and know this, are 42-year-old black men. And when we do the research as to why, it's because they went to jail when they were in their 20s or so due to some kind of drug offense. So when you get out of jail in your 30s, you try to you have a felony, let's say. You try to get a job, but you can't get a job because you have a felony. You can't get housing because you have a felony. You can't get public benefits because you have a felony. So by the time you get to 42, you turn into someone that's angry, hopeless. You go into a shelter. You don't want to work a job, because if you do work that job, you work under the table. I mean, you want a day labor job, some kind of construction job, because you feel like it's too late for you. So if we back up, we need to tell kids, do not commit a felony, do not commit a crime. Now, a lot of kids tell us is they need money, and the way we have sort of organized our society is the quickest way for some kids to be able to feel like they have the resources they need, maybe to help their mothers or to move forward, is to go in a negative direction. So I think all of us need to understand this is a dangerous kind of trap that we've fallen into, and we just need to just break this pipeline. And it's going to require us being really intentional about our kids, how to make sure we give them options, and then if someone commits a crime and they get out, we hire them. We have to hire people so that they can go back and help their families and communities.
And I also think when I was growing up, there were more two-parent families, and the two-parent families were then friends with your friends. The parents were all friends, so it was a automatic support group. I don't see that happening now, and by me being in human resources for many years, both in the private sector and in government, I see that kids become very I mean, when I worked as the HR director of the Richmond Marriott, it was very interesting to me that people would go to 10th grade and they would drop out. Well, once they dropped out, then the opportunities for them are so much less. So I was hiring people for housekeeping and food service because they had no high school degree. And that's pretty much where they stay. And after a while, you cannot make a living making low wages like that. So it's a vicious cycle. But I think a lot of the parents, the parents' lack of involvement, I think, is one issue that I see.
Wow.
Big boy.
First of all, thank you for sharing as you have. My name is Bill Andrews. I'm a graduate of George Wythe High School. What's unique about that is I was one of the first 9 black students to graduate from George Wythe in 1965. So a lot of what you've had to say resonates with me. It was going on back then. My question to you, though, and one of the things that stuck out for me is how were your school counselors? How did they advise you in terms of higher education? And I'm asking that question for a particular reason, and I'll share with you what we went through at George Wythe.
As I stated earlier, our high school counselor did not advise blacks to move forward. It was more vocational areas. Okay. And so again, it was that parental push. My parents, because they both had their master's degrees, there was no thought of whether you're going to school, it's where you're going to school. So even my group of 8, even though all of their parents did not go to college, they were grooming them to go to college. So there just was never any thought of us not going to college. It was always, where are you going? So we did not have that counselor support at all at our high school.
So we did have counselor support. My guidance counselor was a black woman named Alice Clark. So I think it goes back to how things had changed, and so we were encouraged either to go on to higher education or find a trade. And I remember that's when they had home ec classes and trade classes. So it was really the whole thrust was make sure that there's a plan when you leave school.
Thank you. The reason I asked that is that I grew up in that area of Southside they commonly call Blackwell. That's not the name of an area, that is the name of a school. Those of us who went to George Wythe all lived in Southside and went to Blackwell from the 1st grade on up to the 9th grade. We then had a choice of going to Maggie Walker or Armstrong. There were only 2 black schools at that time. We were close to George Wythe in Southside, so we petitioned to go there. I and one other young lady were refused admissions to George Wythe when we tried to get in. So then very young, brash Henry Marsh III took us into U.S. District Court, and the judge said, let these kids in school. As a result of that, we caught hell. Absolute hell. For the first semester, we had to be escorted from the school bus into the classroom. It was very difficult. So all the things you mentioned resonates with me. Someone asked about the school to prison pipeline.
Correct.
I've been on the other side of that pipeline. I worked in the prison system for a long time. So I've seen all those kids who dropped out in 10th grade. They effectively dropped out in the 8th. Okay. I think that one of the things that would help in that process is that we need to learn to believe. As a mental health person, you know about the cognitive behavioral piece. We never believed that we could go any further. The men that I talked to, the homeless guys, they didn't believe that they had any options. They didn't believe. And if you don't believe, it doesn't matter about all the options you're shown. It's not going to happen. It simply will not happen. So it's been a very, very difficult process. I am pleased when every 3 years, if I get a call from a former offender who's out and doing well, he'll call and say, hey, Mr. Andrews, I just want to let you know I'm doing well. I wanted to say hello. I got into a jam not too long ago, but I thought about something you said, and I called for help, and I'm okay now. And I just want to thank you. Now, I don't remember who this person was. I don't have a clue as to what I said to him. but that made my day for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay, it really did. But that prisoner pipeline thing, we do have to change the community. And I think we have to take a more active role in intervening with families. I agree with you. See, when my older sister went to Blackwell, all the teachers knew her and knew my parents. So that first day of class, when they called attendance, and they called my name, and the teacher would say, "Oh, you Miss Rena's boy. You so-and-so's brother. Oh, I know you're going to be all right." That settled that, you know? We were so concerned about survival that it was very hard, and you're very fortunate to have the kind of support that you did. Our parents supported us. They simply didn't know how. They didn't understand the bureaucracy. Our parents were not high school graduates. My sister and I were the first in our family to graduate high school. And my parents were all Southern folk who come from huge families. So there's a lot there that needs to be done. But I think we need to take a more active role in intervening with the families. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your stories with this project. My name is Robin Mines. I too am out of Georgia High School, some years later, 76. You talked about school desegregation or resegregation. Well, segregation is never the answer. Desegregation, when it occurred, it was so haphazardly done because it was forced in this area. So it was a mess. And it was not, the students were not considered at all, okay? So that's what made busing look bad. If it's done properly and correctly and with the students as a priority, it can be effective. Education, if we separate, we can't educate each other, okay? We can't educate each other. And those who are not accustomed to being around people of color, we need you to be intentional. Okay, and seeking out, if you stop by our church or school, talk to some families. There's all kinds of people you can strike conversations with. I don't know, just my personality, wherever I'm at, I end up in a conversation with somebody.
True.
Okay? And I'm not saying that you need to go overboard and but just carry on a conversation. You know, and you gotta stop being afraid of saying the wrong thing. And those of us who are hearing these things, when you hear something that may possibly offend you, just say, "Hey, excuse me, but you may want to watch how you say that because it could be misinterpreted." We got to stop attacking people for what they don't know, because you don't want to be attacked when you aren't aware of a situation, correct? Okay, so it takes on both sides of the fence here. Okay, our problem here in Richmond with our schools mostly resonates around the lack of funding, because the school budget has been ripped off year after year after year. Mismanagement of funds in the Richmond city, okay? Something else that people aren't aware of, a lot of tax dollars in the city are invisible because we have a lot of state-owned properties and various entities that don't have to pay any tax, okay? We have the highest poverty rate in the region, okay? So a lot of your homeowners, the houses aren't very valuable, so you're not gonna get a lot of tax dollars, okay? So the people who own the nice places, we're leaning on them, and it's not enough of that here, okay? So the solution to that is regionalized school systems. The reason we're at a red light for that is because of the racism that exists between Chesterfield and Rico and Richmond, okay?
Tell it.
Okay? If we had a regionalized school system, it wouldn't matter where your child went to school, because each school would be funded properly and have the resources that it's supposed to have, okay? But we can't get that because Virginia chooses to remain segregated and separated, okay? It's not even separate but equal. No. Even if we had that might be an improvement. But we don't even have that, okay? So we have got to grow up. We have to get beyond the hurt feelings. We have to get beyond the fear and recognize that there is a lot of hopelessness. I don't care what the color is, there's a lot of hopelessness in every color. okay? And those of us who know better, do better. Okay? And those of us who know better have to bring hope to those who are hopeless. Alrighty? And hope is generated, okay? It is produced when people engage in acts of liberation and justice, reminding people that they are human.
That's right.
Okay? So human basic needs, first and foremost, have to be met. There's a lot of mental illness. I know in the black community, I can't speak for the white community, but I know in the black community, there's a lot of mental illness, and a lot of that is stemmed from children growing up with PTSD untreated, because our children are looked at as if they don't have PTSD, they're just bad kids. Okay? And that's not so. Even our older children, I'll have a little project going on at the high school, and I have children, Miss Mines, do you have something for me to do? And I'm thinking, really? But I'm hearing that these kids don't want to do anything. Okay, this is what I'm hearing. They're bad. They don't want to participate. That's a lie. Okay, don't believe the lie. These children are not bad. A lot of them are out of bad circumstances. A lot of them are out of circumstances where there's no love, where people don't see them. We have to see them. We have to stop being afraid of them. When people see you and acknowledge you and let you know that you matter, it makes a world of difference in your life. Okay? So, if there have any prayers in the house, we gotta pray. I need you to go back to your churches and think about ways to be intentional. Cross these denominational and color lines. Come together on missions. Let's work together, because that's how we were created. We're supposed to work together. Alrighty? Thank you.
I always feel like we need to shut it down after you speak.
Bad person.
So we are bumping up against the time, but I do know we have somebody else here who was featured in the exhibition. And did you want to say something? Yeah.
Come on up.
I have a different perspective on this. Thank you all for listening to me, and thank you all for sharing your stories with me. I'm a 78 graduate. Oh, okay. I'm a 78 graduate of Georgia. 78. So I'm 40 years old. I've also had the great honor of living, and this will come as a great surprise to all of you, of living in Wickham Court for 19 years. And that was as an adult. It's a long story to that, but we don't need to
tell
it today. However, that thing, we can talk about that separately. I don't want to take up everybody's time with that. Just a short thing, I was a veteran who came out in the 80s, and I don't like even today hearing people say, and I'm sorry, because I know many of you see this, thank you for your service, because that doesn't include, we're going to treat you like, with that respect. And coming out with Reagan and all of that foolishness that went on with 50,000 of us that were thrown out when he could no longer pay us, and many of us became homeless. I was homeless with a baby, and that was that. So I went to Wickham Court, and there I went through college and the whole kit and caboodle. But before that, and I too am a participant in this, before that I had lived on Lee Street in Hartshorne Homes, right next to Carver School. And I was of that generation that started out with a segregated thing, went into an integrated thing in the beginning at Westover Hills, and then on to Georgia, well, Elkhart and Georgia. But I also had the great honor of being a teacher for many years. And what I see or saw then was when I came up in a segregated situation, I am not an advocate for this because it's ideally just a poor thing, but I also know that we live together. I'm saying to black people, we live together. My middle class parents, my dad was not middle class, my mom was, in the way we look at that. The neighbors were the same way. Poor people across the street on Lee Street, no houses and us, and no Hartshorne Homes and blah, 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 blah. But we all lived together, went to school together. And we all shopped and blah, blah, blah. We lived as a community. And then integration came. And that was well and good. And we all thought that was going to be a wonderful thing, except for one thing. We would know when it was all over, we were no longer a community, and we were still in a segregated situation. Only now, all the money had gone out of the balloon, out of the community, everything. And this is how our schools get to be the way they are, because I went to volunteer in George Wood 2 years ago for a whole year. If you haven't been there and you went to George Wood, or if you went to one of the others, and all of them can fit into this, you need to go.
Why?
Because that building is not the one you left. And it's not one that you would want your dog living in. But we allow our children to go there. And what I'm saying is everything everybody said is fine. But until we have a sense, we as black people have a sense of community, the way every other group in this country has a sense of, it's an unfortunate sense, we should be all Americans, but it is what it is right now. Until we get back to something like that, which would mean our middle class people need to live without poor people. When I lived in Wickham Court, you didn't see, the only time, it's just like when I was a child, you only saw white people on the TV. And when the doctor showed up to deal with your grandma, we only saw middle class people when they were coming in to do social work, or some of the teachers. They didn't live there. Or they came to save us through the churches or through some this or some volunteer thing. And that's all well and good. But if, I'm gonna give you one story and I'm gone. There was a little girl, since I lived in a middle class neighborhood, I used to take my children back over there to trick or treat. And a neighbor across the street, she was 16 and had a baby. I had a little one. That was about 28 years ago, because he's 28 now. And I took the kids and we took her, put them in the car, let's go. Because it was unsafe to, you know, run around in there at that time doing that. But we went over there, walked around, Wimber Drive and all of that. And she looked at me and she said, Miss Tillman, she said, do you know people that live in these houses? I said, yeah, I grew up in that one right there. She said, I never knew anybody that lived in a house. Neither her, nor her mom, nor her grandma, and then her baby, who probably now has a baby since she's about 28 years old. Everybody that lived in Wickham Court for generations. What is it they gonna know about aspirationalism? And since they see no one who is like them, who they know, not I see my teacher, you know, that's it, or I see social worker, somebody that's next door to them. So we will never climb out until we deal with this as a black community, and then the wider community, you come in and you deal with your end of this, which is the racism and all of the rest of the isms that go along that might be dragged in from that. That's just my thing. This is an inside and outside problem, not just the outside or an inside problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
So ever since we've opened this exhibition, I'm so blown away by how generous people are who come to these events and who talk and share, and it's been just incredibly moving. And I so appreciate everyone coming and just talking and being so welcoming as well. So, and also thanks to you two for being the focus of today's discussion. And you're all welcome to hang out and talk more. So thank you so much.
Sure.